and welcome to a special episode from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Charlie Betts, and joining me this week are Craig Savage and Daniel Cody. Obviously, you two are Luton Town fans. We're going to talk about a team that's been in League One and the Championship with your beloved Luton Town, and that is Charlton Athletic, who've hit the headlines this week because 3 players have said that they're not going to play for the rest of this season. So, what we're going to do, we're going to discuss this from 3 perspectives today, lads. We're going to talk about it from a fan's perspective, from the players themselves' perspective, and from the manager, Lee Bowyer. So, obviously, initial thoughts on the news that Lyle Taylor, Chris Solly and David Davis are refusing to play for the rest of this season or whatever that shape or form that's going to look like.
Can I go first on this one, Craig? Is that all right?
Yes, you can.
So I want to talk, obviously they're all very different situations. So firstly, let me get David Davis out of the way because he's, to me, the only one that I have no criticism for. A bit like, I guess, the Troy Deeney situation in the Premier League, where you're either in a household or you are at risk. I have no problems with it. I understand, obviously, from the medical point of view, the issues it can cause. And to be honest, at the moment, I don't have an issue with people who say that. Obviously, I know everyone says, oh, well, you're happy to take home the money. But who's to say that those people haven't said, well, I'll give up more money if I don't have to play. So no need to get involved in that. I've no problem with David Davis one. Chris Solly and Lyle Taylor are obviously more due to contractual issues. So there's 2 big problems with this. The first one is only the first 2 or 3 games, depending on scheduling, they're actually going to be contracted for, because football contracts end at the 30th of June generally, and that leads to another issue that will come up later on. But saying you don't want to play in those games because you might get injured, if you're under contract and you're due to work, have you really got a leg to stand on? I don't know from an employer point of view. But it just sort of exposes the footballing world and the way contracts work there to try and benefit clubs and player power. And here it's led to some sort of bizarre issue. And the only thing I will say on this front is that how on earth the season can be restarted at Premier League, Championship or whatever level without a temporary addendum in place for what's going to happen with contracts is beyond belief to me, honestly.
I'm sure, Dan, you can put it in the eye above, but this is something we highlighted a few weeks ago when we spoke about the restart of the league, and it was all these sort of little things that just don't seem to have been thought through before, obviously, restarting it. But Craig Savage, your initial thoughts? You're a bit more of a tempered...
No, I was surprised, to be honest, with both, well, for at least 3 players of Charlton Athletic refusing to play. But I think because it's more publicised, you don't know every other team at the moment in the Championship, which players have not said they want to carry on, but Charlton's been more publicised. I think it's been more publicised because of financial background behind the club with the owners. We don't know what's going on with them. And just because Lyle Taylor's out of contract at the end of the season. And also Lyle Taylor being their key player, their top goal scorer of the season. That's a big blow. And we're going to go through all 3 in a minute. But it's Charlton's best player. And to say that I'm refusing to play, it is a slap in the face. And it's a slap in the face to all 3. Slap in the face to the owners, slap in the face to, managers, to Lee Bowyer, to the players, and to the fans. So it's not fair, but it's saying that as a key worker, I'm not going to go to work because I might get hurt, even though it's not. If there was no pandemic, you'd still be playing to the end of the season regardless. So that's not really a good excuse.
You did mention one important thing, Craig, which was the owner situation, which let's not forget. I know that it doesn't maybe give the answer for what's happening now, but it sort of led to the situation where the majority of the Charlton team is out of contract at the end of the season, has come about because of the owner crisis that's been going on for, a year and a half there now, probably longer. So that is something that we do have to bear in mind as well.
Just you obviously touched on a very important group to any football club, Craig, which is the fans. We'll sort of go into the players and the manager in a bit, but just from both of you obviously supporting a Championship club, and particularly, I know Charlton's slightly bigger, but have had maybe similar fortunes to Luton in the sense of going down a few leagues and just a bit of instability. What I suppose I want to come at this from the first angle, actually a bit differently, is if they change their mind as a fan, can you then accept that basically they're refusing to play? And maybe a change of heart might mean that they do play. As fans, can you accept that? Or is the relationship with the players done now, regardless of however this plays out?
Right. So let's obviously, from a fan perspective, as a non-Charlton fan, I'm delighted because obviously they're down there. As a Charlton fan, I'm pretty pissed off. You play for the club. You don't. You can play for yourself at times, but the most important thing is first you play for the club. And if that's broken straight away, what's the point? Fans will turn. Fans will always turn. The player that doesn't obviously want to give it 100% to the end of his contract. Really, that's his job. If I was a player, and if like bad apples, like I think Solskjaer said, "Oh, I've got bad apples, I'm gonna get rid of them." That will not help the squad at all with squad harmonies. Oh, he's refusing to play. Oh, let's go down this. If I was a Charlton player right now, I'd say, well, F them. Let's win it. Let's do it for ourselves and survive in the Championship.
I guess for me, the big issue here is the Lyle Taylor one and the Chris Solly one. The reason that's causing so much issue is because they're the first players that have come out and said, we're refusing to play because we don't want to harm our chances of getting a move. It's very different, as you know, if you come out and say, I've got severe health concerns for myself or someone else. I've got no issue with that because there's still a lot of uncertainty around that. But the Chris Solly one really surprised me. I know he's out of contract in the summer, but he's been at Charlton. He came through. He's been there for years and years. That's a really weird one for me. But obviously, as Craig mentions, Lyle Taylor is the star player, which is why he's going to be, unfortunately, the brunt of this. But to come out and say that you're not going to play during your contract in case you hurt yourself before the end of your contract, I don't know how that's repairable with the fans. But as myself and Craig proved with our podcast on Saturday, there are stranger things that have happened in football where damage can be repaired.
Well, just a sort of last point on that as a fan, is there an argument that maybe the fact they're being upfront and they're saying that actually we'd rather just not play than go out there and give 50% and not put ourselves... Well, that's the thing. But is there an argument as a fan that maybe to respect that slightly? I'm not saying I'm just playing the devil's advocate. That is there an argument that actually maybe we respect the fact that they're putting the club first in a weird way because we're saying, look, if we go and play now, you get 50% out of us because we've got an eye on a move elsewhere.
It's not respecting the club though because they're not playing at all.
They're playing instead of someone who maybe not as good but could give 100% who is committed to playing in that match. I'm not saying I agree, but I'm just saying.
But financially, if they go down, that would pretty much ruin them, considering what's going on with the owners at the moment. But it's going to be the same for any especially teams in the Championship. Like at the moment, Luton, Barnsley, Charlton, Hull. Going down to League One, it's not ideal for any of those four teams.
No, fair comment. No, I think you've answered that. It was more, as I say, I suppose there is an argument for that. What we're to move on to now, which is obviously the big part of the episode, is the players' sort of perspective. Now, I know that you two have made your thoughts fairly clear on it, but is there any justification for their actions? Is there any part of you that's a bit like, right, I don't agree with it, but I can sort of see where they're coming from? Or for you, is it just completely the most heinous thing they could be doing right now?
So for David Davis, who mentioned health reasons, I made it very clear. I have no problem with that. Until that situation is resolved, they've had all the conversations, as I believe they're starting to have now in the Premier League, about how it's going to be safe and whatever. I can understand everyone having doubts. We're key workers. I'm sure at some point in the last 3 months, Craig has had a fear or a worry in his head when going to work. I certainly have. I'm not going to argue with it. And I can completely understand that. And if there's questions and things to be resolved, no problem. In terms of the contract ones, I can understand the reasoning for it in their heads. But actually, I think it's probably going to end up backfiring a little bit, if anything. Because
I think
a lot of clubs will look at that, though, won't they, Craig?
Well, I think if they were mid-table and nowhere near relegation, that's fine.
Yeah, you've done your job already. Yeah.
But the fact is they're, a couple of points off? They're in the bottom three now.
It just dropped in, the weekend before.
So obviously they weren't on the best performance anyway. So I'll be more peed off. Like, we do need our best players to get out of this situation.
All I would say, and I'm not defending them, but if we put it in perspective, maybe that we understand, if you were offered a promotion at another job where it would change your life, which by the sounds of it, the sort of figures they're talking about, Lyle Taylor, where he could potentially go, he's roughly our age, he's 30 years old, you're not going to get many more big moves. Is the risk of injury a genuine risk that could potentially take away a massive windfall that will set you up for the rest of your life? Are we naive in thinking that he is going to put his club before potentially the security of his future?
Would he have done that? Would he have done that? Would he have done that if there was no pandemic?
Well, it's an excellent point. That's what I'm saying. But that's his justification at the minute.
Well, that was my actual question, Craig, from that. I mean, the one thing I want to say in answer to Charlie's question is I say the same as I do at work in a capacity, which is if you don't like a contract, don't sign it. Very simple, in my opinion. But in terms of Lyle Taylor himself, Craig makes the best point, which is what is the difference between playing on the 20th of June to playing on the 5th of May or whenever it would have finished before? how much of a difference is that going to make? If you get an injury that's, as we've all had, unfortunately, 6, 9, 12 months, whether you start to end the season in May or June or July isn't going to make a huge difference to that.
Just he knows what clubs they're after, and I think there was a rumour about Rangers being one of them. They would have kept tabs on him all last 4-5 months anyway. So I generally don't. It's not like tapping up. It's not tapping up.
No, not saying it's tapping
up.
They're
allowed to. They're allowed to if it's a non-English club for 6 months. There's one thing that's happening, Craig. You've hit the nail on the head. Is a club that's allowed to speak to him either 6 months before or now 1 month before, if it's an English club, has gone to that agent or the player and said, we want him to sign, we don't want him to play, we want to make sure he's fit if we agree a pre-contract. And as soon as he's got the green light to not play, that contract will be signed and he'll be announced at what club he's going to. If it's not the case, that club will say, well, actually, we'll wait till the season's finished and then we'll sign you if it's okay. And as Craig mentions, if it is a Rangers, for example, you've got to think about, well, their league's going to start or is aiming to start when the English league's aiming to finish, which is another issue in itself.
Yeah, that sort of burnout. And that could be his motivation. I just wanted to move on slightly because Lyle Taylor's taken a lot of the heat for this in terms of in the media and the press. And
he won't be the only one.
No, but what I'm saying is that actually Chris Solly seems to have, although he's obviously in the same articles, he's never the leading sort of headline and stuff. What is the possible motivation for him? Because he's not going to get the same move as Lyle Taylor, who's been banging form and scoring goals for fun left, right, and centre. Why would someone like Chris Solly then decide to sort of almost follow suit in that sense? I suppose that's I know you don't know, but what could you speculate on that?
I guess, from my opinion, the only thing can be if you've been at a club your whole career, you're seeing things unravel off the pitch and you're saying, well, I've been a loyal servant and I've not been given a contract with, 3 months to go when the pandemic started. Do you then feel a little bit, well, they're not doing it, they're not loyal to me, why should I be loyal to them? Which, again, is another side of it we haven't even talked about. So we've got to argue here, the reason these are in the last 3 months of their contract is because their clubs haven't been loyal to them in offering them a new one. So there's so many different sides to this, which is crazy. But I don't know what Craig's opinion is on Chris Solly.
Well, as you said, he's been obviously Charlton since 2009, and it's hard when someone who's played there for that long. I think he gets away with it more because he's been there for so long. So he's done his time. He signed a 4-year contract when Premier League clubs were interested in him then. Yeah. So he's done it once. He can probably say no, but it's literally the same thing. What would happen if there was no pandemic? He would just carry on playing as normal to the end of the season.
This is the bit that I don't get out of it. And like you say, the reason Lyle Taylor's probably getting more of the headlines is in a weird way probably a compliment to him because he's so crucial to their success. Exactly. He bullied Luton last year when we went to the Valley. He was brilliant.
Just obviously you touched on something before we move on to the final bit of sort of from Lee Bowyer's perspective, and I don't want to give away any sort of spoilers from an interview you just did, but you spoke to a professional whose club at the minute, it basically depends of him potentially getting offered a new contract, could depend on whether the league's voided, however it plays out. Is that, because you were saying about the loyalty from the club, is it the fact that the club are trying to just save money and cutting costs here, there and everywhere anyway? Or is it because we don't know if we're going to be in League One, we don't know if we're going to get relegated, from the Championship, that we have to cut some of the higher earners in that sense? So I suppose the question I'm asking is, are the club treating them badly, or are the club's hands tied so they're having to basically let these sort of do this?
I mean, you've got to argue if the club hasn't taken the steps to protect its assets, knowing what will happen. I mean, don't forget, at the start of January, Lyle Taylor was free to talk to non-English clubs about a move in July. So it's not like they've not known about it for a while. There's a bit of a problem here because obviously the players are in the middle of a situation that was already going on between the fans and the board. Had been since I went there in League One last year to visit for the game, and had been going on most of this season as well. We've seen loads of news about botched takeovers and whatever else. It's really hard to say, isn't it? There's so many arguments on both sides, and the people who lose out, as you rightly say, in the middle are the fans. Yeah.
Well, I want to move on. Obviously, someone who we know very well, which is obviously Lee Bowyer, the manager. In that sense, Craig, you're a manager. How, before we go any further, how would you handle this situation? Because in my opinion, considering everything that's going on, he's been very magnanimous, been very sort of, honest and open about, what's going on in that situation. I was quite surprised he was so open about it. But as a manager, how would you cope with all of this?
Privately, I'll be going mad because, but as you said, he's been honest, and you have to respect Lee Bowyer for being brutally honest of what's going on. Like, fans want to know why is their best player not playing, or one doesn't want to play, or three of the best players in the team don't want to play. So Lee Bowyer, I think, he's handled it well at the moment, because I think it says at the moment because we don't know how obviously the next few weeks ahead when the season starts on the 20th of June. We need to know what's going to go on from there, how the other players are going to react, and also we don't know that yet. So, and if that would determine the performances on the pitch, whether their next game is. Also, we don't know the fixtures and that yet. But yeah, I would, if I was Lee Bowyer, obviously, the club has obviously given an opportunity to be a manager. But if I was Lee Bowyer, I'd be obviously devastated for the players. But coming the season, unfortunately, I think he's going to have to leave. I feel sorry for him. I do. But this club has messed him about. Obviously, he got sacked like last summer.
I was going to say he was basically in this position, wasn't he, last summer?
Yeah, he got sacked last summer and then rehired the next day or two. So the club's, and it's not. It was a previous owner and obviously the current ones now. It's just the club has just been messed about, and it's hard on him. What can he do? He's done a magnificent job getting them promoted last season with pretty much next to no budget and a low set of players, but. What more can he do? What can he do now?
That was my question. Is there anything else he can do, really? Or is he over a barrel, in a sense?
I want to ask you two a question on that similar topic, really, which is the reason we haven't heard about anyone else is because he's the only one who's come out publicly and said it. My argument is, playing devil's advocate, as Charlie so often likes to do, is it the right thing to do to announce that your players don't want to play on TalkSport?
Yeah, because is it in a weird way, and this is the very cynical part of me, is it a way of saving his own skin? So if we go down, not to do with me, if we'd have had Lyle Taylor and all of this, rather than, they're both injured until foreseeable future, in which then, in that case, if he'd have just lied and,
it would have come out. It would have come out regardless if they lied about it.
If
they lied about it all the way to the end, it would have come out, and then I think fans would have got more angrier then, or at that near the end, than now. They know straight. Right, these three ain't playing. We still got 9 games to go. Let's get on with it.
That will happen at other clubs as well, by the way.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying I'm not saying like they're the only club.
Yeah.
Like it's the only club that's gone public about it. Yeah. Obviously, we know Premier League. Troy Deeney said he doesn't want to play because of health.
But that's health again. Yeah.
That's health. Yeah. But they're the only three that's come. Well, they're the only 3 that's refused to play because of, one was fine, but 2 because of new contracts. But then, if that was the case, at least hundreds of players will be saying the same thing. Like, for example, Luton have got 8 players out of contract at the end of the season.
But I think that's the thing. I think that's what I don't know. Again, I don't want to keep saying devil's advocate, but are we being naive in thinking that clubs don't have a press sort of standard response and stuff? You so often hear players who unfortunately have to maybe go to health sort of things like a rehab or something like that. But as far as we're concerned, you only find it retrospectively. He's got a hamstring strain or something like that. Do you know what I'm getting at? That kind of thing. So, there could be other clubs in this situation where players have down tools, but as far as the sort of releases that have gone, he's injured, etc. I suppose what I'm saying is, are Charlton actually being quite shrewd in this and exposing the players and therefore saving their own skin, and particularly both? I don't know.
My argument is there's still a bit of mismanagement there, or trying to be shrewd. And I take the 2 reasons for that. One, if you wanted the player that desperately, you would try and negotiate a contract before. Now, I'm not saying they hadn't, but they hadn't been able to offer what they wanted or whatever. But you would get your best players tied down as much as possible. Or, as in the case like at Luton, which is one that's been mentioned, obviously, is quite often, if that club had stayed in the Championship, those players would then want a bigger contract than they were on when they signed them, probably in League 2 for a lot of them and in League 1 for the others. The club are saying, well, if we leave these as long as possible, actually, we're probably saving the business money. But because of this unprecedented situation, that's backfired on a lot of teams that can't afford to go the whole hog immediately and offer big deals to everyone.
Well, that's exactly what happened with Sunderland in the last season with Josh Maja, where they knew he was out of contract to come the end of the season. They offered him deal after deal after deal. The agent pretty much said no. And then he got to that point where he said 6 months' time. Got to January, he started speaking to a team in France, and he got the move then. Yeah. For a deal where it's not good enough. Well, it wasn't what the estimate wasn't what they expected.
No, that's an excellent point, Craig. No, I think it's an excellent point. I'm just sort of to round it off, because I'm conscious that we've only got 40 minutes on Zoom. No, I'm joking. No, but to sort of round off the discussion, I suppose I've got 2 final questions for you. Firstly, do you think that these will be the only 3 to come out and say that, now that one's gone, so one club have done it, are we going to have a domino effect of it?
Well, QPR have had pretty much stated that they appalled at the Championship's restarting on the 20th of June. So you could probably technically say they're the second club, even though they've not named any players, but they're pretty much saying, well, why are we playing on the 20th? But I think we would have said something. We would have a lot more by now, considering they've been back to training for 2 weeks.
I think now there's one out in public, I think there'll start to be a few little ones slip through. But I just want to make it clear, I've no problem with the health ones. I get why there's concerns.
No.
And there needs to be questions before everyone can be convinced back, which I get, and safety measures. But the ones about contracts, it's hard because most of them are out of contract for most of the games. How on earth can you enforce that? They haven't got a contract after the 30th of June. So by those first 2 games, you can't force them to play.
Well, it's not like this was ever going to happen. Well, we didn't predict this was going to happen come last.
And neither did football,
August.
which is a problem in itself.
Well, that is true. Like, obviously, now we need to learn from this. Of okay, if it cuts to a situation where we're to block the season for about 3 months, we've got contingency plans of what we do. Players are out of contract, timings of when the next season can start, and obviously, and for players' safety as well. Obviously, with fitness, and once that's over, the break between that. So, when do you start that? Next season, but obviously that's another topic for another day. But
I mean, football needs to rethink how it does contracts basically after this, as it does for many other things as well. We've seen problems across the board. Salary caps, but not even that. About in what other profession do you have? You've got a contract that ends on the 30th of June or whatever. It doesn't happen that often. It's not a commonplace. And even if they rethink that to do a 1 year, or you're contracted till the end of the season, or whatever it may be, it's just the wording's going to have to change long term because it's caused so many issues.
Why can't they just freeze the contract?
I imagine, and I'm only saying this from a teacher perspective, there'll be quite a lot of unions and all that, which, you know, there's a lot of red tape to get through. You know, they try and do that.
But that can only happen if this sort of thing happens. So if you had something like, right, also we had to stop the football for health reasons like this virus here. Right, we're going to, what happens is, if you play on the last year of your contract, they will be frozen until once we start playing again, or once you go back to training, and then when the season finishes. If players are on 2-3 year contract, it does not matter because you're on 2-3 year contracts. But if you're on your into the last year of your contract, you might as well freeze it and then wait to the season. You get that training and then the season's over.
I'm not saying I agree with Craig's solution necessarily, but it is the most important thing out of this, which is how has football come back before we have had a discussion about what's going to happen with the contracts that affects so many people at the clubs. That's the bit that baffles me to end it for me.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of money to be made from players moving. And, you know, I'm sure Lyle Taylor's agent wouldn't want his contract frozen for the money he's probably going to get.
Well, to be honest, if clubs are struggling for money, if they're going to get a higher contract wage from what he's at his current club, what the financial situation is at the moment, I think, will he be happy with that?
I agree, but that's what you two are saying, isn't it? That we've, you know, why are we going back to football when we have no idea how to solve these kind of issues and these loopholes you're talking about? And then my final question, a very quick fire one. Obviously, you are both, you know, a lot more qualified to talk about Championship football than me, and you've seen them play this season. Without Lyle Taylor and obviously Chris Solly and David Davis, are Charlton going to survive this season? Should football come back?
No. And you know what? If they do come back and play, they still won't survive, I don't think. They'd started so well and they're on a big downward spiral. I can't see it happening either way.
They had so many injuries from
really
October.
And there's still this big cloud off the pitch.
Yeah, no, I think obviously that's bad news for Charlton fans, but obviously good news for Luton fans, you two. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me today. I appreciate you giving up your time to do that. Obviously, if you like what you heard, then please like, share and subscribe. And any comments below about whether we think we are talking rubbish or we've made some sense, we've solved the massive gaping hole in players' contracts. Thank you very much.
We are Simon Jordan.
We are Simon Jordan. If you do want to keep up to date with all of our content, of which we've quite a bit coming out at the minute due to the lockdown, then you can follow us on Twitter @HonestFootball3. And we'll see you next time.